Debt defined. What is debt?
Debt. It's a very emotive word, isn't it? You see it in the press, you see it everywhere. What does debt mean? Well, very simply, debt is a description of money that you owe. Money that you owe perhaps on a mortgage, perhaps on a car, perhaps credit cards, perhaps loans. All of it represents debt. And as a nation, we owe many, many billions of pounds.
What does good debt and bad debt mean?
Is all debt bad debt? No, clearly not. If you borrow money to buy a property and you can afford the mortgage payments, yeah, arguably that's a good debt. If you borrow money to start a business and the business is successful, clearly that's a good debt. You might argue that if you borrow money as a student, so long as you're confident that you can get a good job afterwards, yeah, that's a good debt. Bad debt, on the other hand, is where you're borrowing the money when really you can't afford it. So a holiday that you can't afford, a mortgage you get on the property ladder when really you can't afford it. So bad debt simply is really money that you borrow when really you can't afford to repay it.
How can I avoid getting into debt?
The best way to avoid getting into debt is careful planning, really. The best thing to do is actually not have an overdraft on your bank account. Use debit cards rather than credit cards, and pay away when it comes to big ticket items like a holiday, new TV. Wait until you can afford it. Now, some things like a mortgage, that's fine, so long as you can afford the monthly payments. The two biggest costs for most households is transport and accommodation. So always think before you sign up to a mortgage or to the rent, can you actually afford it? Similarly, for an expensive car. And if you find that you're struggling, again, look at those two things. Could you actually find somewhere cheaper to live? Could you live closer to where you work? Could you actually have a smaller car? You can save quite a lot actually by cheaper tax, cheaper insurance, cheaper petrol, cheaper repair bills, and you're actually going to save on the environment as well. Shop around for the best deals for your mobile, for your utilities. Look at the links on the website and record how much you spend each month so you can look back and see where your money, hard-earned money, has actually gone.
What's the difference between secured and unsecured debt?
One of the things that's really important to understand is the difference between secured debt and unsecured debt. A secured debt is where you borrowed money for a house, a car, a hire purchase agreement. With a secured debt, if you don't keep up the repayments, the company can take you to court and repossess the house, the car, etc. Unsecured debt is completely different. It's typically a loan, credit card, where you haven't borrowed the money for anything specific. It's actually then much harder for those companies to get their money back. And you'll find that unsecured, you get lots and lots of phone calls, letters, etc. Whereas with a secured debt, you'll get a few letters, suddenly you're in court, and suddenly it's gone.
Is debt always a result of careless spending?
Debt is by no means always a result of careless spending. As a debt doctor, I have many, many people that come to me, and very often the conversation goes, and then I lost my job, and then I lost my health, and then I became ill, and then there were problems with the kids, and suddenly a situation that was manageable becomes unmanageable. And also very often when there's a crisis, what do people do? Well, they rely on credit. And it's only when the dust is settled and they open all the bills and it's, oh my goodness, how did that happen? The reality is you can't plan for everything. Stuff happens.
Where can I get advice on getting out of debt?
There are lots of different places where you can get advice in relation to debt. An obvious place is the internet. But be aware that many websites do have their own agenda. They might be trying to get you to take out another loan, or they might be promoting IVAs. You can go to free services like the Citizens Advice, but be aware that you may have to wait. You may well be given advice but actually have to do the work yourself, and they may not be able to help if you have property. Finally, there are companies which charge for the service. Check them out because they vary a lot in terms of the quality of what they deliver.
How do I calculate what I really owe?
How do you work out how much you owe? Well, actually, it's not quite as straightforward as you might think. The first obvious thing to do is to add up how much you borrowed, but it's different to the amount you're going to have to pay back, and that can be at least twice as much as the amount you've borrowed. So if your debts are 20,000, you may well, if you make small payments over many years, pay back 40,000, which means you'll probably have to earn 60,000. Makes you think, doesn't it?
What is a debt management company?
You'll find if you look around that there are lots of debt management companies. What a debt management company will do is it will contact all the people you owe money to, explain your own difficulty, and offer small monthly payments, which may very often be accepted. Remember though that debt management is a good short-term option whilst you sort things out, but it's not a long-term solution very often to problems of debt.
Who can help me put together a debt management plan?
Where can you go to get someone to sort out a debt management plan for you? Well, there are really three options. You can do it yourself, you can go to free services, or you can go to a reputable debt management company.
What are the advantages and disadvantages of getting someone to deal with my debt on my behalf?
The advantages of getting someone to deal with debt on your behalf is that you don't have to deal with the people that are constantly phoning you every day, writing you 20 letters a day. Someone else can do it on your behalf. And whereas when somebody phones you, they'll really try and get you to make even a small payment. If someone phones me and I'm acting on your behalf, they're not going to bother to try it on. So that's one of the advantages. The other advantage really is peace of mind. You feel that you've got someone that's working through to a solution that you've agreed. The disadvantage is that very often you have to pay for someone to actually do the work for you. Another disadvantage is that you may not be completely on top of what's happening.
Am I responsible for debts accrued after my card was stolen?
If someone's stolen your card, it's really important to let the credit card companies know straight away. So long as you let them know, and so long as you haven't let someone else get hold of your PIN number, you should find that you're not liable for those debts.
What is an IVA and what does it mean?
What's an IVA? It's a question that people often ask. An IVA stands for an individual voluntary arrangement, and essentially it's bankruptcy light. Strangely, whilst it's called voluntary, it's not really. It's a formal arrangement between you and your creditors where you agree to repay some of the money over usually a 5-year period, and some of the money gets written off. Be aware that if you have property, you may well be required to remortgage. Remember, IVAs are one solution to debt, but they're only one. They're very heavily promoted because typically companies get paid at least £7,000 for administering them. So think carefully and check that it's the right solution for you.
What is a dischargeable debt?
A dischargeable debt is one which is written off, i.e. disappears in bankruptcy. Typically it's credit cards, loans, anything which isn't secured against the property, although it doesn't include this year's council tax, doesn't include anything in terms of fines, and unfortunately it doesn't include any more debts which are backed by the government, which you've taken out as a student.
What is a non-dischargeable debt?
A non-dischargeable debt is a bit like a stubborn stain. It's a debt that doesn't even get written off in bankruptcy. That includes your mortgage or any other secured loans. It includes this year's council tax, any fines that you have from any court, and it also unfortunately now includes any money that you've borrowed that was backed by the government as a student.